Perhaps rather than just repeat what's been said, which I agree with, I'll just introduce a little bit of granularity to the two arguments on Trident on the one hand and Afghanistan on the other. In fact, I could do in reverse order actually, because that's what's on my mind. I think over the weekend David Cameron actually stole a march on Labour, which is a bit depressing. So I think, in actual fact, Labour probably for the last few years should have been putting an end point, more or less, which Cameron I think is in fact done with Afghanistan. Very, very hard now for any British government to take a significant commitment of troops beyond 2015. I think that's just a fact. I think that's been done now, and there's a powerful expectation amongst the UK public. So the question now will be how we treat the next 5 years, perhaps less than that. We have quite an interesting, tragic, call it what you will, paradox, and that is that the places that's quite tragic, isn't it? It's lost in water. Thanks, that's good.
Be careful, they're charging for it now, Eric.
Yeah, just within the shot. We seem to have a general consensus that there's going to be some kind of negotiation with the kind of meaty end of the Taliban. And at the same time, there's a consensus among some that we should continue the same general strategy militarily. But the paradox there is that when we're negotiating with the Taliban, the places they're going to want to control in Afghanistan, in any kind of settlement that we have with them, are going to be the very places that we're fighting in just now, in Helmand and in Kandahar, and places pretty much like that. So you've got this very strong tension coming up over the next few months, actually, during the summer months of each year, particularly over the next couple of years, where you'll see very high levels of casualties, UK casualties in particular, because we have disproportionate levels of casualties, even by comparison to the US. At the same time as potential leaders and leaders of both parties are arguing for greater engagement with the very people who are killing our troops. And I think that's probably a situation that can't go on as people think it is. That paradox isn't being properly addressed. I think it's, from a Labour Party point of view, because they're afraid, because Labour has traditionally been afraid of defence issues. They can't really address them properly, intelligently, because they're afraid of the general impression that we're kind of going native, and nobody's going to go for a party that goes for, you know, lefty native instincts of the past and all that. I think that's a general, put it in fairly simplistic terms, but I think that's kind of the way it is. So in a way, the Tories are actually moving ahead. They're more prepared to ask these questions because it's clearly a fact that the appetite amongst all of our constituents and amongst the British public in general is to feel very strongly about foreign affairs and defence, which hasn't always been the case historically. And I think it's something that the government, and I hope after this leadership election the Labour Party seized on as well. At the moment there's complete stasis as far as I can see. We're arguing in the chamber for an even more conservative position in the government. On Trident, clearly, you know, it's a bore to go through the weakness of the technical argument for Trident from a defence point of view. It's not really a defence argument at all, you guys will know that. It's even a bore to go through the argument that it gives us greater leverage in the world, because it clearly doesn't. If you look from an American perspective, you're not even looking at Europe, never mind Britain. If you're looking at Europe, you're probably looking at the Germans, maybe the French. The Germans don't make a significant contribution in Afghanistan. I think we've got some fundamental misconceptions built into the way we conduct our foreign defence policy. And that's something that you would expect the Defence Review to address. It's clearly not going to. You'd think that since there's quite a strong representation of people from the Labour Party, maybe the shadow Defence Review might address these issues, but I don't think at the moment it looks like that's what's going to happen. From a Trident point of view, you can't address it militarily because it's not really a defence argument. You can't address it really from a geopolitical perspective, because I don't really think it truly gives us the leverage we seem to claim it does. And to be honest, in spite of what's been said before me, I don't think you can address it from a financial perspective either. It's always kind of tricky, all those numbers games. You can always produce a counter-argument. You can talk about decommissioning costs, which have to be front-ended. You can also perhaps argue that, Khalid did argue you could spend money on, you know, on Yasmin as well, and I think probably everyone on domestic issues. But you might say that if we save money from you know, defence and foreign affairs, we might want to spend it on the very people we might be at risk of abandoning. Because the harsh reality when it comes to Afghanistan is the less influence, the more we withdraw, the less influence we'll have on some places like Kandahar. And we'll have to accept standards which will be well below what we would expect in a developed democracy, and that's just the way that's going to have to be. So if I can just conclude, I think when you think from a pragmatic point of view, you guys, you'll be all committed to a particular angle, a particular line, I'm guessing, you know, just kind of sensitive political antenna here. But when you're talking to politicians, you know, there's always shaded areas and so forth. And if you take a polemical perspective, it's very difficult to convince any politician of anything. But the argument with Afghanistan now is that the Conservatives have stolen a march. And we need to be arguing all the time, every single month, as Paul has been, to his credit, over the, everyone, but Paul particularly, as I recall, over the last couple of years, about how we can possibly be having a serious military engagement in an area where we're also negotiating with the, what is perceived at the moment as the enemy. And clearly it soon won't be, because we're talking to these guys. I've talked to them, many people have spoken to these guys. You may have seen the Michael Seppo stuff in the Sunday Times at the weekend, if you didn't have a good look, or the Observer actually, which was all good stuff. On Trident, the argument that you exclude, as Caroline said, the main strategic defence asset from a strategic review of defence is, you know, it's self-evidently ludicrous, it's ridiculous, it's a preposterous perspective. And I sense at the moment, actually, that Diane's clearly been the only leadership candidate that's flagged up that we should include Trident within the review. Hey, we're not saying what the review should conclude, are we? Kind of. But, you know, at least include it within the review. I sense that the idea that we don't is becoming less and less credible. And it may be that other people that are standing for the leadership too may have a sensitivity to that, and they may change the perspective in the next few months. I don't know. But they're certainly more susceptible to the argument. I think from a nuanced point of view, it's well worth putting both of those, you know, slightly more nuanced arguments on Afghanistan and on Trident. But ultimately, of course, we don't. I don't fundamentally believe that you can have anything between Trident replacement and nothing. In truth, that you can run Trident out for 10 years, 15 years, but the alternative delivery mechanisms look politically, militarily, should I say, not credible. But in the meantime, I think arguing for positions that you might think are, you know, a bit woosy, a bit kind of middle of the road, I think that's the sort of thing that will convince people in the new political context that we're in. Labour really needs to start to be more progressive and less locked into a Cold War mindset.